Dynasty football is the absolute best way to play fantasy football. We'll explain why in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting the way that we'd like them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. You can also read me at the 33rd Team. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. You can also read her at Yahoo Fantasy. New little title there for Kate Madjuk. On today's show, we're going to be telling you guys why you should play Dynasty Fantasy Football and why it's superior to every other league format out there. So for maybe the new listeners or the first time listeners, Kate, can you just really briefly explain what Dynasty Football is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dynasty Fantasy Football is pretty much the same as a redraft league, right? There's, similar scoring settings. Like every Dynasty league is as unique as every redraft league. But the biggest difference here is that we are going to be enjoying our same rosters year over year. Now, every Dynasty league might be a little bit different. Most Dynasty rosters carry over their roster from year to year. So, for example, I have a 25-man league where I just continually have that same roster year over year until I trade a player, until I drop a player, until I pick a player up. My roster is my roster in perpetuity. Now, think of it like a keeper league on steroids, I think is probably the best way to describe it.
Yes. I mean, that's a perfect description. Now, obviously, we can get into the weeds on what makes Dynasty really different. But today we're going to give you 3 reasons why you should be playing Dynasty. And Kate, I think the first is the most obvious, right? It's the year-round interest in fantasy football and Dynasty football and just the NFL, because in a regular redraft league, you're doing your drafts in August, early September. And then once your team is eliminated, which can be sometimes by November or by early January, you're basically done until the draft starts next year in August. But in Dynasty football, it never stops, because if the games aren't being played or you're eliminated, you can still be making trades. You can still be making roster moves. You're looking forward to your rookie drafts, which you have typically in May or June or July. You're watching NFL or prospects in college. You're looking at other rosters. You're in communication with the other Dynasty managers. It really is a 12-month league compared to a 4-month league.
And it is the closest way to replicate the actual NFL GM experience because, like you mentioned, even if you're out of contention for a championship, you're still in play for one of these maybe top end draft picks that's going to get you 1 inch closer to contending for a championship next year. So there is no off season. There is no, real way to totally disregard the future without impacting the present. You have to consider both of these aspects when managing your team. Whereas a redraft league, okay, so maybe you are, in some dire straits, right? That's okay because you're gonna hit the reset button here once again come August. That's not the case for Dynasty, so you have to be very strategic about having insight as to whether or not you are a true competitor, and that can kind of shape the way that you put together your roster. Another big difference between Dynasty and redraft is a lack of waivers. I will say the waiver wire is one of the most interesting components of a Dynasty league here because it is so different from that of a redraft league. There will be, maybe some some roster churns, some roster transactions here that, seem a little minuscule because most good players are rostered. Most impactful players are already rostered. So you might see some low end names. People are going to be more inclined to pick up these very deep sleepers and take some dart throws there because, to be honest, usable assets on the waiver wire just aren't nearly as common in a dynasty league as it is in a redraft.
Absolutely. Here's what I'm going to say about redraft leagues because I love redraft leagues. Like, there's nothing that gets me more excited than doing some of my home league redraft leagues. They're so much fun. But if you are a diehard football fan, Dynasty Fantasy Football is for you. I play with plenty of people who are 5 months out of the year football fans. They'll pick up a fantasy magazine in August, read it, and they'll do their draft. But if you're listening to a daily podcast like Locked On Dynasty Football, then you are a diehard football fan, right? You're watching these prospects in January, February, and March. You're watching the NFL Combine. You're scrolling to see the next Adam Schefter bomb on Twitter to see where players are being traded to because you know that's going to affect your dynasty team. If you are a diehard football fan, dynasty football is for you because it's all year long. You're looking at every single player news item. You're wanting to know where players land. You're looking at prospects. And I think for me, that's what's the most intriguing about Dynasty League football.
And here's actually another kind of point, the yin to your yang. What I think is really interesting about Dynasty is that I do think the necessity to be in on the NFL all year round, 12 months a year, that kind of makes you a better NFL fan. So not only does being in a dynasty league kind of sharpen your skills and sharpen your analysis, it really forces you to engage with the NFL at a more constant level. But I think that makes you a smarter consumer of NFL content in general, just because of the sheer necessity of which you have to pay attention to these things in a dynasty setting.
Yes, absolutely. 100% agree. All right, Kay, let's look at some other reasons why we prefer dynasty football over just regular redraft leagues. We will talk about it being more challenging and more skillful next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We absolutely love sports. There's nothing better than getting home after a long day and sitting in front of your TV and watching sports. But unfortunately, with the playoffs now over in the NHL and in the NBA, we're just getting fewer and fewer games than we'd like. And the sports aren't sporting like we'd like them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime that I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. All you need to do is head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary streaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, we are discussing why you should be playing dynasty football over redraft football. I mean, you could play both, obviously, but why we prefer dynasty football. Okay, let's talk about the challenge of dynasty football. Why is it way harder than just regular redraft leagues?
Dynasty fantasy football is so much more challenging for a number of reasons. First, as we mentioned in the previous segment here, it is really, really challenging here to find a opportunity for weekly plays on the waiver wire, right? Because most players are rostered. It makes you more attuned to matchups and the like. There are also a lot of situations that I don't think we pay much attention to in redraft, like contract situations, for example, and draft stock, long-term outlooks for players, which all of these kind of encompass this long-term view that is so critical in Dynasty. But I mean, let's be honest, outside of, a T. Higgins situation where you're wondering, is he going to sign his franchise tag? He finally does. And then, okay, like contract news is kind of over. He's in a contract year, but like now that he signed the franchise tag, you don't really care about his contract for this season, right? Like you have to take all of those things into much higher consideration here when you're in a dynasty league. All of that becomes that much more important.
I agree. One of the things I like about Dynasty football is there's no easy opt out, right? In a redraft league, you have a bad draft or whatever, you're fine. You start over the next year and it's a blank slate. I kind of like having consequences for my own actions, right? If I'm all in on a player, let's say I
That's
don't
a
know,
great
like
way to put it. That's a great way to put it.
let's say I'm all in on a receiver like Marvin Mims. I don't know why anybody would ever do that, and he just flat out sucks, right? I have to deal with the consequences. I can't just say, all right, I'll just read, next year's next year. We'll worry about it. I like the challenge and the responsibility of, hey, these are the players that I picked, and they are going to have either help me win over the next couple of years, or I'm going to be at the bottom of the league, and I don't want that to happen. So the ability and the responsibility to pick and draft and trade for players just means a lot more in Dynasty. The other part that I like is it's more skillful. And the reasoning is because it's not so much injury based, right? If you're in a redraft league, you can have an awesome team, but somebody twists their ankle in week 16 and now all of a sudden you didn't win your championship. Obviously, you still have those injuries in dynasty fantasy. Injuries happen, but you're looking at the course of a bigger picture, 5, 6, 7 years rather than just a 1 or 2 game sample size. So if you're building this awesome team, more likely than not, you're going to end up winning a championship at some point rather than just relying on some injury luck. Just one of the many, many reasons that I prefer playing in dynasty leagues over fantasy leagues.
Yeah, I love that. It does feel much less lucky. Now, obviously, you get into the playoffs. If you're in a single elimination playoff format, like, yeah, there's an element of luck there. But building a perennial dynasty is not a thing that you can accomplish with luck. It has to be you being astute to player values and understanding their value, the value of these players to your respective league mates. It involves so much more that you do have to assimilate the consequences of your own actions. For instance, you mentioned Marvin Mims, which kind of a dagger to my heart here. I'm still hoping for a prime breakout, but
We both
like,
are. Trust me. There's a lot of episodes about us talking about Marvin Mims.
and for good reason. He's a very talented football player, but hasn't translated to the field yet. So, Marcus, for me, as a person who went all out to trade for Marvin Mims after, his big breakout week 2 in the 2023, his rookie season, as somebody who went out and traded a lot of assets in a lot of different leagues for Marvin Mims, I have to deal with the consequences of those actions because now, guess what? I'm stuck with a second-year receiver that I don't know I'm going to be able to do much with.
And then on the flip side of that, let's say you have a lot of conviction on a receiver. Like, for instance, Kate, you really like George Pickens, who, if you're watching with us on YouTube right now, you can see a picture of George Pickens. And you believe, hey, I think this player is going to be a superstar. I want to be in on him right now because I know in a year or two he's going to be a star. You draft him maybe a little bit earlier than ADP in your startup drafts, or you go out and trade for that player, and they become a superstar. That is just so rewarding and fulfilling. Where in a redraft league, let's say you love CeeDee Lamb 3 years ago, but now all of a sudden he's the number 1 overall pick and you have no chance to acquire him, right? Because you're drafting 8th, right? That's something that I love about the Dynasty is if I have a conviction on a player and it ends up turning out to be correct, I feel personally rewarded. I get to watch this player every single Sunday perform. To me, there's nothing better. And that's my favorite part is taking a risk on a couple players that I really liked in college, maybe still like, in a situation now, and maybe they're going to get more targets down the road or more opportunities. And to see that player have success in the NFL is the reason why I can't stop playing Dynasty football.
Yep. One of my favorite claims to fame, let's own ours right now. My favorite claims to fame. I was all in on Derrick Henry after everybody had all their feet in and took all their feet out. I was in on him at the perfect season. I went out and I traded for Derrick Henry, and I think every single one of my dynasty leagues before his breakout season, because I was reading the tea leaves. Another one of my favorite breakouts, Devontae Adams, who we'll remember had, some ups and downs his first 2 NFL seasons, riddled with drops, didn't look like the all-pro receiver we know he eventually ends up being. Like, that's so rewarding to be on a player and see it come to fruition. Marcus, can you tell us a couple of your claims to fame?
Yeah, I mean, some of them are small. Like they don't always become superstars, and that's okay. Like for me, a perfect example was I remember Randall Cobb during his rookie season as a kick returner for Green Bay, and they would occasionally play him out of the backfield. And I just always thought, hey, Randall Cobb is a really good player. And if he ever becomes a full-time slot player for Green Bay, he's going to be a really nice weapon. So in all my dynasty leagues that I grabbed him, stashed him at the bottom of my roster, waited out that whole season. And then the following year took off and he scored a bunch of touchdowns and became one of Aaron Rodgers' favorite targets. Like those are the kind of ones where it's like, this is a late second round pick, I believe the final pick in the second round during the 2011 draft, who rises up the depth chart and becomes a useful fantasy player. That one's really exciting. I think another one, I'm going to use the Cowboy example, Tony Pollard. You could just see as a rookie that Tony Pollard had the juice, and you were just waiting for his opportunity to get more and more work. And by the 2021, 22, and then obviously the 2023 season, he got that work and was a top 10 running back in each of those seasons. So that's one of my favorite parts of this is watching the development of players, feeling invested in those players, Kate, because you know how this goes. You could have this awesome player in your redraft league, and he's starting to really come on in the final 4 weeks of the season. And then it's a bummer to have to throw him back to the pool and expose him to everybody else. In dynasty leagues, you get to keep this player throughout their career as long as you want to hold them. And it's just so rewarding to see them be successful in the NFL. All right, let's go ahead and talk about another reason why we love Dynasty League football. And that's trading, because there's nothing better than trading. And trading in Dynasty Leagues is so much fun. We will discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're going to be burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football podcast. We are discussing why you should be playing Dynasty Football. On tomorrow's show, we're going to talk about how Dynasty Leagues could be better. And then on Wednesday's show with Matt, we'll be looking at some rule changes that you should implement in your Dynasty Leagues. But Kate, let's talk about, listen, one of our favorite parts of Dynasty Leagues, and that's trading. Why can you trade more in Dynasty Leagues than you can in redraft leagues?
The biggest thing that you're looking at when it comes to trading is you get to do it year round. That is the best part of Dynasty, because as we know, the off season can be a very boring time and there's not a lot of things to do. But what you can do in the off season is plant your flags on guys for the season to come, make your mark. So no better time to fill the void of footballless Sundays than to execute some trades. There is never a moment where you are not looking to improve your roster or shape your roster better suited to the goals of your team, whether you're in a rebuild mode, whether you are in a championship window. There is never a time where you aren't looking to improve your roster. The other beautiful part about Dynasty and the ability to trade, I think, comes from the ability to execute the rookie drafts. Obviously,
Yes.
in a redraft league, you are going to be doing an annual draft, but what I think is the most interesting thing is, obviously the redraft draft, you have it every year and you reset your roster, but you don't trade the picks the way that you will in a dynasty rookie draft, for instance. There's so much move even within that draft itself that you just don't see in redraft leagues.
Well, because
Uh,
you
you
can't
know,
trade picks. I mean,
yes,
being able to trade picks just makes it so much easier to execute a trade rather than player for player trades only, which is the only thing you can do in redraft leagues.
exactly. That in and of itself just makes for so much more movement and especially during the draft, right? You have to be astute to every pick because there will be trade ups, there will be trade backs, there will be a lot of opportunities to hashtag go and get your guy that you're not necessarily going to have in redraft because maybe you're picking at the 1-2 turn and you've got a couple rounds basically before you're back to your next pick. No, if I see a guy that I want, I can work on executing a trade to go get my guy. Like
Yes.
rookie
Yes.
drafts are so fun, and that whole aspect of trading is what makes them as exciting as they are.
Another reason why you see more trades in dynasty leagues compared to redraft leagues is because in a redraft league, everybody has the same goal: win the championship that year, because that is the only goal, right? Only one person can win, and all other 11 members of that league are trying to accomplish the same goal. That's not the case in dynasty leagues, right? In a dynasty league, you might have 7 teams actually going for the championship. You might have 3 that are clearly rebuilding and trying to get a top 3 or 4 pick. And then you have a couple teams in the middle that maybe aren't sure what they're doing. They kind of want to see how the year is going before committing to one path or another. It just makes getting deals done a lot easier. Teams become clear sellers at the trade deadline. If you have a trade deadline, there's clearly teams that are buying for now and they don't care what future draft picks they're giving up. It just makes it much easier to trade, on top of being able to trade more assets compared to a redraft league because of your rookie picks, because of somebody like Dontavian Wicks, who I really like, doesn't have a ton of value in a redraft league. But maybe not maybe, he definitely has more value in a dynasty league because you are betting on the upside there. So he'll carry more weight in a trade compared to a redraft league. Just one of the many, many reasons why I love trading in dynasty leagues.
Yes, player valuations can be extremely different because you do have to value, not just production, but you also have to take the weight of a player's age. Are they close to the quote unquote cliff, especially pertinent for running backs who are racking up those career touch totals? You have to consider contract. We've said time and time again that, like, if you're looking for a tiebreaker between two players, maybe of a similar tier, who are kind of being drafted back to back, a great tiebreaker is like how much time is left on their deal, how much
Yes.
guaranteed money is left on
Yes.
their deal, because that can be pertinent to the amount of playing time that they have before the next period of uncertainty kicks in. Like all of that is taken into account, whereas it's just not in the picture in redraft leagues.
No, no. You're just going to see way more trades in a dynasty league. And we did an episode last week, in case you missed it, on how to execute trades, how to make more trades in your dynasty leagues. Go check that out. If you love trading and that's your favorite part of fantasy football, I promise you're going to love playing in dynasty leagues, because I think I mentioned it on a last week's show. I have a league that completed 233 trades in one off season.
That
One
is
off season.
wild.
Because I'm in a league with 11 other members that love to trade. It's their favorite thing is to sit around, have a couple beers and talk trade and make offers. It really is the best part of fantasy football. You get that bonding with the other members of your league. It's a really, really good time. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Again, on tomorrow's show, we're going to look on the flip side of this. What does redraft leagues, or what do they do that's better than dynasty leagues, and what can we do to improve our Dynasty Leagues. Make sure you tune in for that. And again, on Wednesday, Matt Williamson will be here to talk about some rule changes that you should be implementing in your Dynasty Leagues. Go follow the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Go follow the show on YouTube as well. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. You can read her at Yahoo Fantasy now. Make sure you go check out her work today. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.